Before I call the meeting to order, is there anyone who needs an additional copy of the annual report and all the other materials that we'll be talking about here? If so, please raise your hand and we will get you that copy. All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order for our annual Congregational business meeting. Alicia, could you, or Tim, do we have a quorum? Okay. Alicia, you're on.
I'm on. Just checking.
All the minister mics are on and all the hands are on.
Okay, great.
So you're good.
Let us pray. Let's open this meeting with prayer. Dear God, thank you for every seat that has been filled here today, for each mind and heart that fills the presence of this room. We are grateful. Only you truly know what we are setting out to accomplish. We have ideas, a vision, hints. We have talents, abilities, and time to work and to give. However, only you can see in perfect detail the end of every beginning, every project, every season. Nothing is ever in vain. Even mistakes and missteps are used for good. Your righteousness transcends all our efforts and understanding. Strengthen our confidence in who you have made us to be. Do away with our divisions that we may find unity, but may we always value dissent as much as agreement. Bless this meeting today, all those present, as well as the lives of those we will encounter and serve afterward. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
I'd like to call Dave Hansen forward in order to go forth and lead us through the budget that we're going to be voting on as a congregation to see if we approve or if there's various things that need to be adjusted on it.
Good morning. I move that the congregation approve the budget which has been recommended by the Church Council and dated revised as of 9/18/2023. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Well, go ahead.
Questions, comments, things,
Any
please
questions now?
raise your hand and we will get a mic to you so that you can go through and talk.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if you can address the $80,000 deficit that's been budgeted for next year? I mean, what is the plan to cover that? How did we arrive at that? I felt like our stewardship campaign, I think it's goal. I don't know if Marcia's here, if she can nod her head to that, but I'm just wondering how we ended up with an $80,000 deficit in the budget.
We have tried for a number of years to bring forth a balanced budget. It hasn't happened. And therefore, Council has made arrangements to form a task force which will evaluate the income side and the expense side and figure out how we can somehow be the church that we want to be and be able to pay for it. I would love to have brought forth a balanced budget, but it just we couldn't do it this year. I didn't.
Do we have reserves to cover the deficit, was the question.
What was the question? Yeah, yes, we have some reserves which we have for several years been digging into. Unfortunately, there is a limit on that, but certainly we'll be all right this year.
Yeah, I have may I follow up? Was that Kelly? Hi, Kelly. Yeah, we know, and by the way, it'd be great to get this, huh? Closer? Oh, like that, okay. It would be great to get these materials more than 48 hours before a congregational meeting, so we could, you know, but that said, once you get into it, we noted that there's an actual deficit in 2022 of $35,000. There's $133,000 actual deficit last year, and we're proposing going forward with an operating budget deficit of 81,000. And I would just implore council to get their heads around this and to develop a strategy. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that we don't have a strategy right now after multiple years of deficit budgets and actual deficits that are greater than the budgeted deficits. So and a lot of questions in this budget, but
I assure you the council has heard that message, and that is why we're setting up a committee to address this in more detail. We tried several different approaches, and we're not able to come up with a reduced deficit for this year. At the same time, well, the thing that concerns me is that the trend is in the wrong direction. Last year we had a proposed deficit. It was smaller than what we're proposing this year. At the same time, last year we had planned to draw on some kind of one-time uses of funds, and that enabled us to show a smaller deficit, but the structural deficit is still there. And so we think it's important to get our hands around that. And unfortunately, we were not able to do that. And we felt it was better to have a budget that we are following than to wait several more months to find how we will resolve that. But we have heard the message, and we are definitely addressing that.
There was a theory a few years ago that if we had the capital campaign, we could eliminate the debt, we would be able to have a balanced budget. But as you can see over the last few years, and looking at the amount of interest that we've had to pay over the past year, eliminating having to pay interest is not by itself going to do the job. And that's why we need to look at other things.
So do I understand correctly that when we have an actual deficit that we have to come from somewhere, it's coming from our general endowment fund? Is that correct?
No, we do not make inroads on our endowment fund. We do have cash flow of various amounts in different funds and everything which we can use.
Okay, so we have somehow a cash flow that will cover as much as presumably an $80,000 deficit?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, thank you. I had sent an email saying what I wanted to ask. Is this the right time to ask?
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine.
I would really like to know, because I'm an old member here, not only in age, but in years of membership, and I'd really like to know what has happened with the amounts in the Special Mission Endowment Fund 1 year to the next, and in the General Endowment Fund 1 year to the next, because we don't seem to get that report anymore, which we used to get.
I can't give you don't have with me the background, the history for that, but as you can see from the summary statement of financial position, as of June 30th, the General Endowment Fund balance was $1,419,169, and the Special Mission Endowment Fund was $1,536,168. It's on, no, that's not on the budget sheet. That's on the separate sheet that was passed out. Yeah.
And it's in the updated version, it's in the one that was passed out, and also if you're looking electronically, it was the one that was sent yesterday, to the point that was made earlier about not sending things out last minute.
No. But there were also to be copies of that available here, but apparently not. Oh.
No, we were just given copies of the
But
annual
do they
report
include
and the
do
council
they include these
report.
things? Were they restapled in it or something? No.
I don't know why.
Yes. Historically, the question was historically, what was the endowment fund a year ago? And I don't have with me that material, but obviously every year it goes up and down depending upon the market. So, but we've been pretty intent about not digging into it.
Our treasurer, who didn't announce himself before he talked earlier, Dave Marshall, says he knows the answer to that question.
Unfortunately, I don't have it broken out by SMEF and general. It's a combined number, but the most recent number from Bernstein, our financial advisor for the endowment, the total endowment right now is just a shade over $3 million. The margin loan balance has declined from January 2022, it was $982,000. It is now at $525,000. Compared to January of this year, the total endowment went from 2.9 million to 3.082 million. So not much change there, but the margin loan is significantly down.
With respect to the margin loan, which, as Dave mentioned, was a year ago $980,609, that has been reduced from two sources. One, capital campaign contributions. Those have reduced it by $120,000. The other thing that we've used to reduce it, because we were tired of paying 8% interest, so we took various dollars from various funds and used that temporarily to reduce the deficit. So when we say that it's now down to 522,000, that's a temporary reduction because we still must pay back 338,000 that came from other sources. So actually, the true balance at this time is 860,609.
Yes. Can you tell us the cash on hand at the present time?
What was the question? Well, let's see. No, I don't have that figure here. I don't have that figure here at this time. What? Right, but the page which you apparently don't have was summary statement of financial position, and as of June 30th, the end of the fiscal year about which we're reporting, the cash on was 491,000, and at Byline Bank was 112,000. The larger figure I mentioned, yes.
I'm going to try and repeat everything that just happened here that wasn't mic'd there. Mark said that that larger figure includes $320,000 that's from the nursery school, and Dave confirmed that was true. So the second number that Dave said, which is the $112,000, that's the amount from Byland Bank that is just the churches and doesn't include anything from the nursery school.
This may be a difficult question to answer, just lobbed out of nowhere, but I wonder is it possible to give us a a figure for, say, the past 3 years of how much has been spent each of those years on outside consulting fees?
You're referring to the consultants that we had for the capital campaign, and that was about $150,000, and that's will be paid from the capital campaign proceeds.
Okay. And then there was a consultant relationship that was established after the fasting from whiteness period of time. Was there not? Didn't we have a consulting team come in and help guide us through the internal reflection about that?
No, we didn't have a consulting team go through and
Okay.
do that. That was me working with John Edgerton at the
Great,
time to
thanks
do that.
thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, anything that we had around fasting of whiteness, around like public relations training and stuff from the UCC, all of that was through either the denominations or it was pro bono work. So there's nothing that we paid for that would be reflected here in the budget. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns that folks want to bring forward before we vote?
Thank you. There are lots of line item questions that we have, but we evidently won't have time for that. But there's one thing. I do note that the revenue we bring in to cover per capita is very, very low relative to historical funds that we brought in to pay per capita. And we're budgeting only $1,450 to cover a $27,500 per capita payment. It would seem that we could do an awful lot more to inform the congregation about that and to develop essentially a mini campaign to ensure that members of the congregation do take responsibility for their per capita. We've done that as a congregation before. It has not happened in the last few years. I believe we can do it again.
I also agree with you. That is something that is definitely on council leadership's radar, and we have plans in order to go through and do that. We have plans to look into it. We don't have formalized plans right now for our strategy to go through and tackle that, but it's something we talk about every week in our list of things that we need to look at.
As much as we talk about it over the last few years and send out letters, et cetera, the congregation simply has not responded to the extent required to cover it with designated funds for the per capita.
The question from Ann Armstrong? Wait, Ann, till we get the microphone.
Usually can be heard. Would it be out of order at this point to explain to those here what per capita is and why it's important for people to take responsibility for that per capita fee?
Do you want to explain what per capita is, or do you want me to explain? So per capita is something we go through, and that is part of our denominational support. We have two denominations. We have the United Church of Christ. We also have the Presbyterian Church USA. We go through and we have funds that go back to them, and it's based on the members and number of members we have in our congregation. Depends on how much we're supposed to be going through. We have a particular number that is expected from the Presbyterian Church. PCUSA expects us to do a particular amount based on our congregation. We go through and we provide the same amount to UCC so that it's evenly divided between the two. But it's through denominational support, and our denominations go through and provide a lot of support to us that maybe might seem unseen. They provide support to our pastors. They provide support to our council. They're providing support right now for our interim search process that we have for our pastor. So going through and helping to make sure that we go and help to fund portions of our denominations is also important, because we are all members of this church, but this church is part of the two denominations that are there.
I want to call the question, but before I do, I just wanted to make also a statement. We just talked about the per capita, which everybody needs to know about. I think another thing people need to know about that they may not think about is we do have these two endowment funds, and they don't only increase by the market going up and decrease by the market going down, they also increase by our giving. Now, right now, the capital campaign is what we're focusing on for our giving, and we should, and we need to do that. And part of that is to help increase the SMEF endowment. But even when it's not a capital campaign year, if you have some money sitting around you don't know what to do with, give it to one of the endowments, because it does help support our budgets. I used to have a lot better understanding of how the endowments worked with the budgets than I do now, but I'm hoping that it still is doing what it needs to do. And I will call the question.
If you call the question, we have to vote on you calling the questions. All right. All those, hold on a second. We can't go there. The question has been called, so I'm going to do a parliamentarian procedure on this. All those in favor of going ahead and calling the question and not having any more commentary or questions about this, say aye, raise your hand. Down. All those opposed, raise your hand. Oh, we might actually have to vote on or do a count on this. All those in favor of going ahead and calling the question and having no more discussion, raise your hands again. And there's people behind you also, Tim, when you're... All those opposed, please raise your hands. And raise them high so we can see them. Okay, so the motion was not approved, and we are continuing to discuss what's going on. Are there other questions and comments that people have? I thought I saw a hand over here. Lois?
Well, I know that last year there was a question about the Faith in Action spending, and so
Can you tilt the microphone towards your head like this? Yeah.
Last year, I know there was a question in this session about Faith in Action spending, and I think there still are questions. So number one, I've kept record of everything that Faith in Action approves to spend, I will give you a tally for how we spent money between July 1 last summer to June 30 this year. The endowment, we spent $97,555. On offerings, we have $15,262. That includes Fourth Sunday, special offerings when we respond to a disaster as well. And finally, every other dollar we spend is from restricted money that you give in the lounge for house to home. Somebody sends a check to the church but says, I want it to go to Housing Forward, $7,030 there. Now that's I know what's in the report is $23,000. We'll try to find out which there, but there's other things that people might say, oh, that's Faith in Action. Kids Closet, that's money in the restricted fund, and they spend only the money they receive. But somebody might say, oh, that's a Faith in Action thing. So, so we'll just see what the difference is. But I do want everyone to know that we're very careful to make sure we're only spending the money that we receive, and that every dollar that receives to Faith in Action is restricted for only that purpose. So if it doesn't get spent, it is spent in the following year. So sometimes those years, the budget is new revenue, and the revenue may be already sitting there waiting for us to spend it.
Are there other questions, comments, Again, if people have questions or comments, please raise your hands high so I can see them. All right, we have Keith. Hi, Keith. Wait for the mic to come to you.
Yeah, my question was about the capital campaign. I don't know if you already
We haven't
covered
done
it.
capital campaign. Is it about the numbers for capital campaign, or is it about the actual?
Overall.
Let's wait till we get to the capital campaign report.
All right.
All right, we got Mark again on the side. Yeah, I only asked Lydia to do this, and maybe we should swap out. I don't know, Alicia, if you're looking.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be asking all these questions. I did remember last year we spoke about having budget breakfasts where there were times when we could all gather and ask questions about a budget that we would receive. Vicky's not, you remember those, don't you, Vicky? And so, but I'll just ask one more line item question, then I have others. We're budgeting $5,000 for building use donations, down from $10,000 last year. Last year, actual, we only brought in $850, and we're projecting $5,000 for next year. What are we going to do to get $5,000 worth of building use donations?
We've worked with our church administrator, and council's approved a new policy to go through and request increased funding for building, or I don't know if they're going to call them fees or something like that, for building use from people who are not our mission partners who use our church. And we did not do that last year because we were going through and checking with the IRS to make sure that it wasn't going to negatively affect the fact that we have nonprofit status, that it was going to be viewed as rent. It is not going to be viewed as that. So we're going to be able to go through and ask them to give money that is comparable to other churches in the community and also the Park District in terms of that.
That would make a beautiful budget note. If we had a budget narrative or a series of footnotes that would explain things like changes in personnel lines, that would explain why we're only budgeting $700 to upgrade and to continually maintain the website, and so on. If we had a budget narrative that explained those things, there might be fewer line item questions.
Okay, and that's a good point. Thank you.
I would just like to...
Sorry, Till.
Oh, sorry. So it is almost November. Our operating budget, our fiscal year began July 1st. So it's almost 4 months into the year, and we're only now looking at a budget. I understand well the budget preparation process takes a lot of time, a lot of input, but I just encourage you to start the process earlier, to allow for a budget that's passed at the beginning of the fiscal year, not within a third of the year has already passed, but will also allow for the congregation to get materials ahead of time with enough time to study them, to engage in conversation at a breakfast, and to be more involved in the procedure. And this is important for our church. And just to be presented with a document at the 11th hour after the fiscal year has already begun and say, please bless this, it's not fair. It's not fair to the congregation, particularly now. We're in a period of transition, right? We need engagement of all of our members in the future of this church, and that requires information promptly, and it requires people to talk about it and to engage in it and to understand what the goals are for next year. We're presented with the ministry outline. There's no explanation of how this ministry outline, what we accomplished last year on the ministry outline, nor is there any explanation how the ministry outline, which is supposed to be tied together with the budget, is reflected in the budget. So I just encourage you to give more thought to this on a more timely basis so that the congregation as a whole has more transparency and more ability and opportunity to engage.
Your point is well taken, obviously. One of the issues we had this year, of course, was the loss of our lead pastor. And we moved into the situation where we now have a search committee for an interim lead pastor. And we learned in the course of trying to develop that our denominations have certain requirements that we must meet for funding an interim lead pastor. So that really caused quite a change as we were moving through the budgetary process. It's not the sole thing, but that's... The other interesting thing, though, was that the later we got, the more information we had about what was being spent for the current year. And so in that sense, we were better off. Go ahead. That's right.
Are there any more questions? All right, we got Kate here.
I would like to mention that I was not able to find any financial support for scouting, which is a big part of our church in this budget. And maybe we should vote next week if there's a lot of questions and people still need to, they're not feeling comfortable moving forward. I don't know what the rules are.
Are you voting to table the motion for approving the budget? If you call the call. Okay, the question has been called. Yeah. All those in favor of calling the question? We double checked. Well, last time we did that, someone complained to us, people complained to us that if you call the question, that you have to vote on calling the question. So no matter what, people are going to complain that we didn't do the right thing. The motion is still on the floor. A question has been called for the motion. The motion was second. I can't hear it. I can't hear what you're saying, Susan. No, he didn't say a motion. He says he called the question, so that is effectively a motion. Okay. It was not seconded. It's been seconded. All those in favor of calling the question say aye. Raise your hands high, because we're going to have to count again, probably. This is calling the question, the motion for calling the question and having no more conversation or comments about the motion for the budget. You can only raise one hand, please, not two. I see you back there. All those against, raise your hands now. All right, calling question, motion passed. All right, all those in favor of approving the budget, raise your hands, please. All those against, please raise your hands. I was going to say we had one, yeah. All right, motion passes. We have an approved budget. And next we'll have our treasurer's report from Dave Marshall, our treasurer.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll make this brief. I've been struggling with computer issues all week, so I don't have a handout. I just wanted to kind of highlight, last year I was here and I highlighted two items. We said we were going to try to reduce the margin loan. I think we've reduced it. We have not eliminated it, but that remains a focus. And as you heard already, it's down by almost half from what it was a year ago. The other thing that I mentioned in my treasurer's report last year was that we were going to work on cash management. We had some high balances, in particular in the church's operating checking account, and so far we have contributed, I believe it's over $100,000 to reducing the margin loan by reducing our checking account balance. Now we still have enough to operate, but we had a large amount of money sitting in a non-interest-bearing checking account, and that's been applied to the margin loan. As far as what I as treasurer hope we are focusing on in the coming year, one you're going to hear about in a moment, and that is the conclusion of the capital campaign. That's ongoing. You've certainly heard of it by now, I hope, and if you have not already contributed, I'll encourage you to thoughtfully consider what you can contribute and make a contribution. I believe Rick Ashton is going to be speaking to that in a moment. The other thing you have also heard is the elimination of the structural budget deficit. As you heard, we were not able to put together a budget that showed a balance between revenues and expenses this year. We do think that's important for the long-term sustainability of our church and our mission, and we will redouble our efforts to do that going forward. So there may be questions, I don't know. I'll open the floor to questions if there are questions on that. Thank you very much.
Next on our agenda is the ministry outline, which you should all have a copy of. We've gone through, and it's close to what we did this year, but there have been some slight shifts and slight changes that we want to go through. We still have the same 3 overall key priorities, which are to engage fully the church's whole community, to strengthen the congregants' relationships with God and with each other, to cultivate ways of working together to further the church's ministries, and to enhance the church's financial resources. There's key things that we have in here that are differences that we're looking at this year as opposed to last year. Under engaging fully the church's whole community, we're looking and doing more about enhancing the visitor experience. I know that this is something that Newcomers Committee, I believe, or whatever team we have, yes, I'm getting a yes, it's newcomers, is looking at seeing what the experience of new visitors to our church, how are we as a community being welcoming, being engaging with people who are new, who walk through these doors, who don't have any connection to us otherwise. How are we going through and bringing them in the church? And is this church set up right now the way that it is? Easy to navigate? Do we need to do more things with wayfinding, other things like that? We also want to continue to increase the community of care within the congregation. We previously had on here, in connection with the capital campaign, that we're going to look at getting a new designated term pastor in order to look at small groups. That's something that has shifted with the capital campaign, and it's also shifted our ministry outline. Because we're going through and in the midst of a search for an interim lead pastor and going to be bringing on a full lead pastor, we felt it was probably too much, council felt it was too much to bring on another pastor also as well. So we're looking at focusing at expanding the role of our deacons care groups and strengthening our existing small groups we have, where people are continuing to organically grassroots meeting together. Before we still have on sort of our backlog the idea of having a designated term pastor, but we decided that this year is not the time to bring one on. For the next section, which is about ways to work together to further the church's ministries. I know that's something that Faith in Action is looking at more, is to deepen the congregation's engagement with our programming then, including partnering with agencies that will have more member involvement so that it's not just that we are giving money and giving money out to certain agencies, but that there's actual tangible engagement of the congregation and members going through and taking part with, such as the way that the relationship that we have right now with Beyond Hunger, where many people volunteer there. We want to go through and see if we can have that sort of engagement more with additional programs that we go ahead and have a relationship with. We are also continuing to look at expanding the diversity and reach of the First United Church Nursery School in the wider community. I believe that they're going to be offering a full-day program this year for the first time. It has begun already. So they're not offering a full-day program? They're offering a 5-day-a-week program. Okay. That is something different than what they offered in the past, so that would be an improvement forward. Thank you for that. Thank you, Kelly, for that correction. And then for the area about financial resources, again, we are going to want to continue the work in the capital campaign through the end of this calendar year. So we're going to be finishing up the capital campaign in December. Stewardship is going to continue to increase the pledgings and total giving by 5%, as we have done in previous years and done successfully then. And then we spoke earlier when I was talking to someone else during, I think, over here about the increasing financial support through our building partners. Specifically, our building partners are our non-mission partners. They're just people who go through and are organizations that are using our building, sometimes on a consistent basis, sometimes on a one-off basis. And what can we do in order to make sure that we can increase the financial funds that we're getting from them for when they use our building resources that are great in this community. Are there questions, comments that folks have about the ministry outline? Yes, Joanne?
Just a couple of quick comments. One is talking about welcoming people. There's an opportunity online.
Hold on, let's get you a mic.
We have the opportunity online. Every week it comes out with our e-blast. But if you don't get that, call Heather at the church. You can sign up to be a greeter. You can sign up to have your children be acolytes. Or if you're a child, you can sign up to be an acolyte, and you can sign up as a lay liturgist. I think we have fallen down on greeting. I am very unhappy when I don't see a greeter at both doors, and I think we can do that. And if you can't figure out how to do it online, just call Heather at the church to sign up. The other thing is, I was listening to Lois talking about engaging us in mission, and I think we would be more engaged, Lois, if we really knew where our money was going and how much was going to what. I know you just gave us a whole list, but as I mentioned to you privately before, when we give money to new moms today, it would be nice to get a report. How much money did we actually give to new moms? And what are they able to do with it? That would help us engage. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions? All right. I realized that I did not do this properly. I need to put a motion on the table to approve the ministry outline before I went through and was talking about there. All those, or is there a second? I got so moved. I got multiple people moving. I've got a second over here. All right. Are there any other questions or comments? All those in favor of accepting and approving this ministry outline for the fiscal year, please raise your hands. Hi. All right. All those opposed, please raise your hands. Motion passes? Motion passes. All right. Thank you very much. Let me get back to the agenda that I have on my phone. Capital campaign. Rick, can you please come up? Thank you so much for being the task force chair.
Thank you. This will be brief. The leadership phase of the capital campaign continues with personal solicitations from council members to members of the community. If you would like to have a chat with a member of the council or with me regarding the campaign and your participation in it, please let me know. We'll be happy to meet with you and discuss that. The congregation-wide phase of the campaign, the Next Begins Now phase, which kicked off on September 10th, will wrap up at the end of the year, December 31st. You will hear at offering time next week from a member of the congregation about participation. We'll continue to remind and encourage on through the end of the year. But we will, at the end of December, get out of the way of our annual stewardship activity so that the church's operations can go on. I believe it's fair to say that the campaign has gone more slowly than we anticipated it would. Thank you to all who have made a commitment. Thank you to all who are about to make that commitment. I'll be glad to give you the card to fill out. And please, if you have not yet made that commitment, go forward and let the church know what you will be doing in support. The four major pieces of focus for the campaign, just as a reminder, are the retirement of the margin loan, improvements to the building to improve accessibility and environmental sustainability, an addition to the Special Mission Endowment Fund, and an investment in the community of care, particularly around the matter of welcome and encouragement to those who are new. So that's what I have to report about the capital campaign. Thank you all for your continued interest and support. And as the slogan, "Next Begins Now," I will say, if you haven't acted, please act now. Thank you.
And we're not done yet. There is a question on the floor that was from Keith earlier. So I'm going back to Keith now so he can ask or make his comments.
Do you have any numbers? How are we doing with this campaign? I don't, you say it's going slowly. I don't know what that means.
I'm sorry, I can't hear the question.
So you're saying the campaign's going slowly. Do you have any numbers? How are we doing? What's happening?
We're having challenges with the capturing of our information. Our friends at Latson Company built a system for that which doesn't quite integrate with our own accounting. But we have developed some slightly different assumptions from what they were using. At the time we kicked off the congregation-wide phase of the campaign, the commitments were $1,125,000. The suggested overall goal for the campaign was $1,750,000. Since September 10, we have had somewhere between 25 and 50 new commitments with a dollar amount somewhere between $130,000 and $250,000 so far. I'm sorry that I'm talking in these vague terms, but this is the level of information that we have at this moment. We will pry it loose within the next several days and reconstruct it so that it will be a more firm report. But that's about as well as we can do in reporting at this time.
I probably should have stayed out here and not walked all the way back.
All right, so of the 1.2 million that you have received, how does that get distributed?
That's above my pay grade. That's the job of the church council. The church council has decided that the highest priority of the campaign is repayment of the loan. And how and when that is accomplished with cash flow will play out over the next couple of years. The commitments to the campaign above and beyond what is needed to retire the loan are for the council to decide.
Council went through and passed a proposal, passed a motion a few months ago saying that as commitments are coming in and the money is coming in, that the money would be applied to the capital campaign repayment first. And so that's what's been happening first for the initial ones that are coming through then. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we've gotten money that has been above what we would need in order to pay off the loan in order to distribute that.
These are fair questions that I wish I had better answers.
I was going to say, do you have another question, Keith, before I?
I just, excuse me, want to ask on behalf of the congregation. I know there's been some activity as far as building and grounds projects. Can you give us any update on what's been going on in that respect?
In anticipation that we would build a new ramp from Kenilworth to the west entrance here for improved accessibility to the building, we have commissioned an architecture firm to develop preliminary plans up to a stage where preliminary estimates can be submitted by contractors. That design work has been completed. Those drawings and specifications were turned over to a project management firm approximately 2 months ago, and they have not come back yet with any numbers. That is all moot, depending on what funds are raised. We also had some preliminary exploration regarding signage for the building on Lake Street, but found that the potential for doing a meaningful sign would be a very complicated matter involving the village's sign ordinance, which greater minds than mine cannot understand. So the short answer is there's no commitment to anything. There's some exploratory work that has been done.
Did we pay for the consulting for the ramps? And we also keep in mind we already have 2 accessible ramps for the building. And when will we know what their price was?
I want to make a note that neither of our accessible ramps to the building are actually ADA compliant. So they're not actually accessible. We have ramps, but they're not good for wheelchairs. We'd be removing the one, we committed to one. So yeah, it's going through and removing them and replacing them is the proposal that we have for the capital campaign.
We have paid the architect for professional services, yes. I didn't hear the rest of your question, Keith.
Well, how much did we pay for the consultant?
The total architect fees, including the topographic survey, which was necessary to determine what kind of ramp was possible, that's been about $13,000.
And then the consultants that I think you were referring to would be Latz and Company. That is $150,000, I think, fee. All that money for Latz is coming out of the capital campaign proceeds. It's not coming out of the general budgeting piece. We got a discount on them. Are there other questions or comments?
Please, if you have not acted, act now. Thank you.
Because next begins now? Is that how that's supposed to end? All right. I move to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second? All those in favor of adjournment, say aye or raise your hands high. Any opposed? Who wants to stick around? All right. Will you please have a prayer?
Would you join me in prayer? Gracious and loving God, send your Spirit upon us right now to remind us why we do this. That it is for the sake of building your realm here on earth. Remind us of our role in this work. We pray that, as you always have, you would continue to remind us that you go before us, you stand beside us, and you are behind us to encourage us. In Jesus' name, amen.